Hello there, Birdie here with what I hope to be a long series reviewing the army lists for the new edition of the Middle-earth strategy battle game. So today we're going to go through Azog's Hunters, and we do have a plan for this video. So first of all, we're going to go through all the different profiles of each component within the army itself. We're going to rate them, discuss their strengths, the weaknesses, the strengths and weaknesses of the army itself, the army list, and what it offers and what it struggles with. We'll then discuss how to use it in competitive play. Then we'll discuss the army building side of it, so the different ways you can build this army for it to run in certain styles. We'll then discuss the actual army building itself, all the key questions that you'd probably be wanting to know and would be deciding between as you're building these lists. And then I'm going to provide you a few example lists, and then at the end we're going to discuss how we'd rank and rate this army as a whole with a final rating. So let's first of all get on to the profiles of what can be taken within this army list. So first of all, we have Azog. Now, Azog is the most expensive piece in this list. He comes in at 175 points. He's an outgunned bad hero. He's movement 6 when he's unmounted. Fight value of 7. Shoot value of 4 is irrelevant. Strength 5. Defense 5. 3 attacks, 3 wounds, with a courage of a 5+ and intelligence of 5+. He's also 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. Now, quite vaguely, it just says his war gear is hand weapons. We don't quite know how many, but there we go. That was their wording choice for some reason. The options within this army list is literally just to take him on the white wag. And I would recommend you always do this. It makes a lot of sense. We'll come on to the white wag in just a moment. Now, he has Challenge, March, Strength, and Strike as his heroic actions. With him being Fight 7, Strike means he can still get to D10, Fight 10, with D3 that Strike now provides. Strength now doubles a model strength, so he would go from Strength 5 to Strength 10, and then him having March is rather useful. Especially if he's mounted and you've got access to more might. And last of all, we have Challenge, which is now potentially viable. It would give him an extra attack against his target that he did the challenge with. However, they would also have to be a hero of legend, seeing as Azog is a hero of legend. And he already wounds any heroes on a 3+ as it is. So maybe you don't need the other benefits in there, but he would get might back once he has killed them. So he is a good hero hunter anyway, whether you need to call a challenge or not. I would say most of the time probably not, but could be useful in some scenarios. Now, Azog is burly, however, he's only got single-handed weapons in this list, so you're never going to really get to use that unless you were carrying a heavy object. He has the General of the North rule. This means that he has a 12-inch standfast, and he also affects other orc heroes. And then last of all, he has the I am the Master rule, which is his hero hunting ability, meaning he will always wound heroes on a 3+. Now, coming on to his rating, that ties straight into the first category, which is hero killing. Azog is one of, if not the best hero killing model in the game. If he can get the knockdown on somebody from atop his white wag, and he's charged, he would have 8 dice at any hero needing 3+. Even if he goes into a monster that he can't knock down or another cav model, he'll still have 3 or 4 dice, needing just 3s. You've also got an abundance of might that you can use to try and force extra wounds through if you roll particularly badly. So yes, Azog is a real threat to your opponent's heroes, and you do see the fear in their eyes when he goes down on the table. Fight 7, although there's now been buffs to heroes' fight values, Fight 7 is still scary. There's been a lot of Fight 5 increase to Fight 6. There's not that much that's gone past Fight 6, other than the few obvious. So his Fight 7 is still a scary prospect. In terms of troop killing, he's Strength 5 base, but he's got no bonus to wound or anything like that. If you came up against Army of the Dead, for instance, and they were D8, he can have a bit of trouble needing natural 6s. He's pretty good at killing troops, but if you face anything dwarves or anything with a shield wall, or in particular Army of the Dead, you've got a little bit of a problem. He could stall. So things like heroic combats are not advised in those scenarios because you can't rely on him to force through the kill. Now, in terms of dealing with monsters, if he's dealing with a hero monster, he's fantastic. However, the reason I'm not giving him a 10 is if you come up against a normal monster, again, he could stall. If they're defense 8 or higher, he's going to have a bit of a problem, especially if they've got quite a few wounds. He'll struggle to get them killed in one turn. It'll probably take him multiple, in which case he's probably cost more than they have. So if they're holding him up for as long as that, then they've probably done a good job. In terms of survivability, I've given him a 7. Because the rule with mounts now allows you to use their might, will, and fate, it gives him 2 fate, 4 will, 5 might. It does make him quite survivable. However, the issue with him is he's only D5 in this list. You can't take the heavy armour on him. So his D5 does mean if he's losing fights, he is probably taking damage. You've got might and a really high fight value and strike to try and make sure that doesn't happen. But just be aware if it does, you're going to take a lot of damage. He doesn't have heroic defense. If he loses a strike off against another big hero, he could be killed in one go very easily. So you have to play around that a bit. In terms of price, I give him a 7. He is expensive. However, I think he does justify that with what he does for your army and what he can do to your opponent. And it is possible for him to make back those points in a game. If he takes out just 2 of your opponent's heroes that are adding up to this sort of points value, which is very, very possible for him to do so, he can do very well. Now, moving on to magic. He's got the 4 will between him and the White Wag, as I mentioned, so he is able to resist some spells for a limited amount of time, but he doesn't have resistance to magic. There's no way he can get any support like that, and sadly that means that he's okay against magic for a few turns, but under sustained attack he will struggle to stave it off, and then he can be in trouble sometimes. Because he's got quite a lot of might, you could try and spend, if you know you're up against a caster, you could spend his will sparingly and try and use might to force through the resists to slow down your opponent's magic onslaught, because at that point your will is possibly more valuable to you than your might points. In terms of special rules, so I've given him an 8, because in this army, considering it's got quite low courage, him having an extended 12-inch standfast is invaluable for you. And on top of that, it affects other orc heroes. The other heroes in your army don't have the greatest courage in the world, and they don't have much of a will store. So, yes, he is very useful at keeping your army together if you break. The I am the Master rule as well is phenomenal. By far the best hero killing special rule in the game, even better than Andoril. 3+ to be wounding is fantastic. So, yeah, giving him an 8 for that. Might, Will, and Fate, I am classifying him as though he's got the White Wag with him, because you should always take them together. Having essentially 5 might, 4 will, 2 fate is excellent. Gives you a lot of options. You can even separate them if you need to, so you can dismount if you ever needed to separate the might, or you needed to do a strike combat combination, something like that. In terms of personal use, I find him really fun to use. It does give you some options. The fact the mount is so strong as well, they do work well as a combination. And the average rating for all of the above brings us out to a final rating of exactly 8. And we'll move on to the next hero. We'll discuss his White Warg, actually, which is a hero. So the White Warg comes in as a Warg Gundabad hero mount. It's on a 50mm base, so it is bigger than your normal cavalry model base. 10-inch move with Fight 5, Strength 5, D5, with 2 attacks, 2 wounds, Courage 6, and Intelligence 6, with 2 Might, 1 Will, 1 Fate. And as I say, you can use them together, mounted, and if he separates, the White Warg is fearless. Now, it just comes with claws and teeth, no heroic actions, no options or any upgrades or anything like that. The Packmaster means that only Warg models will benefit from the Standfast or any heroic moves that the White Warg might call. It does cause terror, so if you take the upgrade onto Azog, strangely Azog doesn't cause terror by himself, but if he's on the White Warg, he does. And then the Fell Sight rule means that they can charge when doesn't have line of sight. Fantastically underrated rule. And essentially, the rating here is just Azogs because they are one model initially, unless you look to dismount them. Moving on, we have Bolg, so Spawn of Azog, his son. Comes in at 175 points, just like his dad. Also Fight 7. Shoot value of 4+, which is pretty good, with Strength 5, Defense 7, highest defense model in the army, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, Courage 5+, Intelligence 5+, with 3 Might, 3 Will, 1 Fate. Now he comes as standard with heavy armour and a 2-handed weapon. And Bolg is also burly, so having that 2-handed weapon means that he will hit at Strength 5 and then have a +1 to wound. So essentially, he'll be hitting them at Strength 7. So if you're facing similar things that I mentioned that Azog might struggle against, such as Dwarves or Army of the Dead or something like that, if you're facing anything D7, Bolg is wounding them on 4s. And even if they're D8, it's still 5, so he can be more reliable in that regard. His options, he gets a Fell Warg for 20 points or an Orc Bow for 5. Has the same heroic actions as Azog, so a challenge, march, strength, and strike. And he has a few special rules, so Ancient Enemies, Dwarf, and Elf, meaning he re-rolls 1s if he's against either of those, meaning his Dwarf killing is even more reliable. And then Bringer of Death. Now, this is a rule he had in the last edition, however, it has been improved. So he still causes terror on 2 kills. He creates a Harbinger of Evil 12-inch bubble after 5 kills, but instead of 10 kills, it's now 8 kills to get Mighty Hero a free point of might every turn. Now, from past experience of using him a lot in the last edition, you could regularly get Bolg up to about 8 kills quite consistently, but then you would stall because it's likely he's run out of might by this point. To get to the 10, if it did happen, it would always happen at the very end of the game, at which point you only got a turn or 2 of it before the game ended, and it didn't really ever come to fruition enough in the games. So now it's been decreased to only 8 needed. That's a huge buff for him now. It does make him a lot better if you can consistently pick and choose his fights and be smart with how you use him. Only issue with him is the Fell Warg is only D4. It's not a hero mount like Azog's. It doesn't have multiple wounds and Might, Will, Fate. It's very easy for him to get dismounted, so you do need to protect him a bit on the way in. The Fell Warg does give him Fell Sight, so he can be hiding behind buildings and then jump out and charge people. Use that to your advantage. I never take him with the Orc Bow, but he's not the worst at it, but then you're not getting him close enough to combat if you're only moving him half and trying to shoot. And if you're moving him half, he's only hitting on a 5, so I would say it's not worth it. In terms of his stats, so I've given him a 9 for hero killing. He doesn't quite have the I am the master rule that Azog has. He's not going to wound every hero on a 3. but hitting at strength 5 with +1 to wound, he will damage most heroes on quite low rolls. Anyone D7, he's wounding on 4s. Anyone D5, he's wounding on 3s, just like Azog would be. So it's only really hero monsters that are D8 and above that he's going to be struggling to get wounds through. So I've given him a 9. He is extremely good against heroes still. His troop killing, I've given him a 10 because he is just so reliable with 4 dice on the charge. If he wins the fight, he's going to kill. As I say, even if they're a D6, D7 troop, he's killing them on 4s. So you should be minimum getting a killer turn from him, even if they've charged you. So I think I've given him a 10 for that. I've mentioned monsters already. If they're defense 8 and higher, it just reduces his chances of getting wounds through. But he's still a good damage dealer, so he's still good against them. It's still only anything up to D9 is still only needing 5s to wound them, flat 5. So he is still very good at this, just not perfect. In terms of survivability, I've given him an 8. He is D7 compared to Azog's D5, which is really nice to have. Having the 3 might, 3 will, and the fate does help keep him alive. He can resist some spells to get him out of tricky situations. In terms of price, I've gone with a 7. He is expensive, especially if you take the WAG on him now. He's 195 points. It is a lot, but he gives you good value. He will churn through your opponent's troops. He will usually win, beat up enemy heroes. He can quite easily make back that points investment. In terms of magic, though, he can be a little weak to it. He's only got the 3 will. He doesn't get any extra will from any mount. He'll resist a couple of spells at best, but then he's in trouble. So only giving him a 5, that's probably his biggest weakness. In terms of special rules, I've given him a 9. The Burley really helps him, guarantees him damage, and the Bringer of Death rule in particular is fantastic. It's also a lot of fun to use. I'll move on actually a bit further down. For the personal use, this is why I've given him a 10. He's very fun to use. It's nice having this little mini game, almost like a challenge to yourself. Are you able to get into that 8 kill threshold and get yourself Mighty Hero? You do feel a sense of achievement whenever you reach it in a game. So I'm giving him a 10 for personal use and fun. Might Will Fate only an 8 because the fate is low, and if he's going to be your leader in the army, you want somebody with more than 1 fate ideally. I know you don't get that very often in Evil, but there we go. Final rating means it does leave Bolg on an 8.2, so ever so slightly higher than Azog, which means I'm going to be extremely hypocritical later in this video. Moving on, we have Yazneg, the Hunter Orc captain, who's been given some nice buffs in this edition. So he's now been increased to Fight 5. He's got Strength 4, D5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds with Courage 6 and Intelligence 6. So he's got a buff to his Courage and a buff to his Fight value. He's now, he's still 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate, and he comes armed with armour and a 2-handed weapon. However, you can upgrade him to give him a Felwag and a Lance for 25 points. Now that would take him up to 80. He has Heroic Strike, and then he has 2 special rules, which is Expert Rider, meaning he could run and pick up light objects without having to dismount, and he can re-roll any jump tests, climb tests, any of those sort of things. His other rule, very different from what it used to be. Price of Failure means that if he is within 3 inches of Azog, you can declare it at the beginning of a fight that he's in, and he can re-roll all dice in his dual roll. And if he wins the fight, fantastic, no problem. If he loses the fight, however, after doing that, then he does automatically take a wound. So what I'd maybe recommend with this is you try and keep Yazneg and Azog next to each other. You can always use this special rule as long as he's up against normal troops. or where you think there's a very good chance he's going to win the fight, just do it every turn, just to try and guarantee that he wins the fight and does the damage that you want him to be doing. You could even team him and Azog up against an enemy hero, and then it'd be good to do it just to make sure you guarantee get that 6 that you need to win the fight without having to burn extra might. And it's unlikely you should lose the fight if you've got Azog in there with his fight value as well. Even if it's a tight fight, just say you're fighting elves in the fight 5, if you've got a decent chance of still winning the fight with the amount of dice you've got, especially re-rolling them. But if you did lose, he's got 2 wounds and a fate, so you could at least do it once. Keep risking it every time until it fails once for you. If you pass your fate, I'd keep doing it until it pushes him down to 1 wound if you failed again. If you failed that fate, then maybe, and you go down to 1 wound, you might have to stop doing it then. But it depends how important the fight is, and if he might be dying anyway if he doesn't win a fight, maybe it's worth doing then anyway. So it's a fun little decision to make as the game goes on. So I love this new rule. He's one of my favourite models, is Yasnik, so I'm thrilled that he's been given this. And he's a lot more expensive now, but I think it justifies it because that rule is fantastic. In terms of hero killing, I'm giving him a 7 because with the dice, the knockdown, with the reroll of all of his dice as well, he's got a lance to get a +1 to wound. He could really do a lot of hero killing in this edition. It should be fun to use him. And in terms of troop killing, I've given him an 8 because if he's facing anything fight 4 or lower, he'll have a field day running in next to Azog with 3 dice, re-rolling those 3 if you need to win the fight. He's got a very good chance of winning it, and if he does, you should be killing whatever you're up against. So he should be pretty reliable. In terms of monsters, it's a bit risky. If you put him into a monster and he loses, you're in trouble. He's likely dead. But he could do some damage. If you get him in there to guarantee the fight, and you've got someone like Azog in the fight that's getting your fight value up there, he can be the one that does the damage to the monster, which is nice. But you just got to pick and choose wisely where you put him into monsters. In terms of survivability, I've given him a 6. He's just 2 wounds and a fate. Just pretty bog standard for this sort of hero. He will die sometimes. He's only D5. It's pretty average. In terms of price, I've given him a 7. He is more expensive than he used to be, but I think he justifies it because he looks like he is going to be a lot more reliable now. He's got the courage buff and the fight value buff compared to what he had before. Yeah, it's a big upgrade for only 20 points from what he used to be. In terms of magic, I've put this as a 4 because this is a big weakness for him. He does at least have 1 will to try and resist. But yeah, he's not going to resist for long unless you get extremely lucky rolling 6s. So that is a bit of a weakness for an 80-point model. Special rules given a 7. I've talked you through those. I think they're very good. Nice buffs for him. And Might Will Fate, I've given him a 7 because he's at the upper end of your standard lesser hero with the 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. Personal use-wise, I've given him a 9. I love using him. He's a very good, reliable damage dealer for you, which is always a nice thing to have. The new special rule gives you a nice decision to constantly try and make and weigh up whether it's worth doing or not. And in my opinion, it's just a really nice mounted sculpt. So I love using it on the board. Final rating left him on a 6.8 there. So of course not as good as Azog or Bolg, but still an excellent addition to the army. Next we have Narzug, the Hunter Orc Captain. Fight value of only 4 with shoot value of 3+, which is incredible for an evil archer. Strength 4, now only D4 compared to previous edition D5, with 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 6+, intelligence 6+, with only 2 might now, 1 will, 1 fate. Narzug comes automatically equipped with light armour, a hand weapon and a bow. With no options now, you cannot mount Narzug. The only heroic action available to you is heroic accuracy. And the special rules are expert shot, poisoned attacks, and lethal aim. So Azog is still, I think it was 50 points in the last edition, now 55, despite having the defense decrease, the might decrease, cannot be taken on a wag now as well. However, the special rules mean that Azog now gets to shoot twice every turn, which is a fantastic buff for an archer that already hits on a 3+. And then on top of that, the lethal aim special rule means that Azog gets to spend a 3 point of might every turn on shooting. So you should get at least one hit every turn based on that fantastic shoot value. And essentially what that means is anything up to D6 that you'd normally be needing 6s to wound, you'd only need 5s because you've got that +1 basically from the lethal aim. So it just makes this army able to take out or at least wound big things. And the army bonus gives you Morgul arrows. What that means is that if you do wound something, a multi-wound hero or a monster or something, every turn after it's been wounded by a Morgul arrow, you roll a dice at the beginning of the turn. And if you roll a 1, they just keep taking a wound. So Azog can chip away at big stuff if left to do so. Pity only 2 might now, not 3. So you can't just burn a load of might to force something through. But still, a very, very good roll. And then poison attacks just means you get to re-roll ones as well. So in terms of hero killing, I've given Azog a 5. Absolutely will not be killing heroes in combat. However, can do what I said there by chipping away at wounds on them by shooting them. In terms of troop killing, I've gone for a 6 because any high defense troop coming towards you, you can use Azog and the lethal aim to be wounding them on 5s. So you can pick off, if you don't want to be going for the heroes or they've kept them really out of sight or at the back, you can use Azog to chip away at some enemy troops really nicely. And then in terms of monsters, it's similar to the heroes. You're not going to do anything in combat against them, but you can get these wounds on them, and then hopefully the Morgul arrows roll can come through for you sometimes. Going on to survivability, I've only given him a 5. He's now only defense 4. So yes, he's great at shooting, but you need to be careful not to get shot back. And only 1 fate, 2 wounds, can die pretty quickly and easily if you're not careful. So got to be used wisely. In terms of price, I've gone with a 7 because even though points have gone up by 5 points, I do think Azog's been given quite a nice buff here. The expert shot is fantastic. The poisoned arrows is great as well. Lethal aim was already fantastic, and I think for 55 points, it's a good bargain. It's still weak to magic, like most of the things in this army, so only a 5 rating for that. And then for special rules, I've given a 9 because having an evil archer that's this good with 2 shots and lethal aim, Azog is a joy to use for the evil side. Definitely the best evil archer in the game. Was in the last edition anyway, but even more so now. Might Wolfit, I've only given a 7. If he had 3 might, it'd be higher because 3 might plus the lethal aim would have been amazing. But just a 7 for that because the might's been reduced. And from personal use, I've gone with a 7 because Azog's very fun to use. It's nice having this for an evil army. And it leaves a final rating of 6.2. Moving on next, we have Fimble. Now, sadly, Fimble's gone in the opposite direction. I've had quite a few nerfs here, so Fimble is now only fight 4. Still strength 5, d5, 5+ shoot value, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 6, intelligence 7+, and 2 might, 2 will, 1 fate. So to discuss those, Fimble has lost a fight value. The intelligence is quite low as well, and also has lost a might point from the previous edition, but has gained an additional will point. I'm not entirely sure as to why that is, considering Fimble seemed a pretty scared, cowardly sort of character around Azog, but interesting choice to give him 2 will. Does mean he'll be less likely to run away than the other 2 minor fortitude heroes we've just looked at. He comes equipped with armour and a hand weapon. He can be given a Felwag for an additional 20 points. He's still the same 50 points that he used to be. He now only has, however, heroic actions strength, whereas he used to have strike as well. Expert Rider, similar to Yasneg, and Hunt Master means that he can go through difficult terrain without any penalty. Will still get the cav bonuses, and also gains +1 fight when charging. So would go from fight 4 back to his old fight 5. Now, in terms of statistics here, I've gone for a hero killing rating of 5. He's not great at that anymore, only fight 4 now, even fight 5 when he charges. A lot of heroes have gone up to fight 6, even ones that are fight 5 could potentially strike. He might be good at hunting captains, that's about it really. And without strike, he's a target himself of being hero hunted, so you really want to keep him away from enemy heroes for the most part. In terms of troop killing, I've only given him a 6 because he relies very much on charging now to get the extra fight value. If he's only fight 4 going into stuff, he might just be drawing with very normal troops, which is really not ideal. Similar story with monsters. He's going to go in there and be unable to match them for fight value, so he's going to be very much at their mercy of their dice. If they roll well and match him or better him, then he's taking damage. He's only D5. 2 wounds and a fate, he might even get killed, so you really want to avoid getting him in against monsters, I think. In terms of survivability, I've given him a 6. Pretty standard, he's just a 2 wounds, 1 fate. D5 makes him a little more survivable than Azog. And price, I've given him a 6 because if you were going to take him, you are going to take him on a Felwag. And that means he's gone up from 60 points in the previous edition to 70. And yet he is a worse model now. So I don't think his price is amazing. I don't think you're going to see many Fimbles now. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he's going to be popular. In terms of magic, I've given him a 6. He is slightly better than the others at resisting, so he has got 2 will, but that's about all you can say for him. That's the only thing that's been improved on his profile. Might Will Fate, I've given him a 6. It's nice he's got the extra will, but it's sad that he lost the extra might point. And from a personal use, only a 5. I don't think he's going to be very popular in this edition. I can see why, because he's too much of a soft target. He's not going to be good at killing troops. He's not going to be great against heroes. He will just not be a brilliant addition anymore to people's armies. He won't be such the auto-include he used to be. So the final rating has left him on just a 5.6 there. Moving on, we've got the Hunter Orc Captain. Only 45 points. Fight value 4, shoot value 4 plus, strength 4, d5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage and intelligence both 7 pluses, with 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate standard captain. Comes equipped with armour and the very ambiguous just hand weapons. He can be given a Felwag for 20 points, an Orc Bow for 5, and a 2-handed weapon for 5 points, and has just Heroic March as the only specialised heroic action, with the special rule Savage Hunters. Now, what Savage Hunters does is gives +1 attack on the charge. So if you do take a Hunter Orc Captain on a Felwag and you charge in, he has his base 2 attacks, he'll get an additional attack for charging with Savage Hunters, and he'll get an additional attack from charging his cav. So he would be a 4 attack model on the charge. If he gets charged, however, he's only 2 attacks. So there's a big difference there. For hero killing, I've only given him a 4 plus. 5. For knocking down heroes, he'll do some damage to them once he's knocked them down, but he needs to win the fight. He's only fight 4. Doesn't have strike, of course, so it's a risk on your end if you're putting him into a hero. If you choose it wisely, it could work. In terms of troop killing, I've given him a 6. providing he can win the fight with his fight value issues. If he wins, and especially if he's done it on the charge and knocked him down, he's got a very good chance of killing quite a few and being quite consistent for you. But it all depends on if he can win the fight. In terms of monsters, I've only given him a 4 because you're unlikely to win the fight. If you do, you're only strength 4. Most monsters are D7+, so you need 6s, so it's really not a good matchup. Survivability-wise, I've given him a 5. Just 2 wounds, 1 fate, D5, very similar to the ones that have come before him. He can die quite easily. And in terms of price, I've given him a 7. Fantastically cheap price for his base model. If you want to take him on the WAG, 65 points is still pretty good for a model that can get 4 attacks on the charge. And then for magic, I've only given him a 5. Only the 1 will, speaks for itself. Special rules 6, it's nice he gets the +1 attack on the charge, but with many blades he used to just have 3 attacks base, so not when he was on the wide, but when he was on foot, so it's nice you're going to see some of them mounted now, but I don't think the rule's that amazing. Standard might will fate for a captain, just rating of a 6, and from personal use, they're fun to use. It's nice to kind of shock your opponent first time you charge him in, say, oh, he's got 4 attacks, and you explain why. But final ratings left him on a 5.5. So that's all the heroes in the list. And we'll move on to the warriors now. So we'll start with the Hunter Orc Warrior. 8 points, fight value 3, shoot value 4+, strength 3, D4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 8+, intelligence 8+, and comes equipped as standard with armour and hand weapons. Can be given an Orc Bow for a point, and can get a 2-handed weapon for a point. Now, 2-handed weapons are a bit better in this edition in the sense that if you get a 6, it stays a 6. But with Hunter Orcs, you need to be winning the fight, and they're only fight 3, so having a -1 on everything but a 6 does hinder their ability to win the fight. They've got the special rule Savage Hunters, just like the Hunter Orc Captain. They do get an extra attack on the charge, which is really nice. But in this army, you have no option for a banner anymore on these Hunter Orcs. And there's no space supports either. So you need to be winning the fights with your dice. So taking any with 2-handed weapons, you're just asking for them to lose the fight and get killed. So in terms of hero killing, I'm giving them only a 2. Yeah, I've put them above a 1 because at least they do have the potential to charge a hero and get 2 attacks against them. And at strength 4, if they messed up their dice roll and you won the fight, you can do a little bit of damage to them. Troop killing, I've given them a 5. Very much depends on if you can get them to charge or not. If they do charge, though, they are excellent. Strength 4 with the 2 attacks. If you're winning the fight, if you can isolate models to be 1-on-1 in particular, you've got a real nice advantage there of dice and killing power. In terms of monsters, I've given them a 2. It's not a 1, again, because if they do charge them to tag them up, they at least get 2 attacks, so you've got at least a chance of winning the fight, and you could do a little bit of damage if you do. Survivability-wise, I've given them a 1. These are some of the squishiest models in the game. Defense 4, and really low courage as well. They die in combat, they'll die to shooting, and if you get broken, they all run away. So their survivability is shocking, hence why you do need to take them in decent numbers. Price, though, I've given them an 8. They are also 8 points. They are quite cheap for what they do and give you, even though they do have 2 severe weaknesses, which is their low defense and their courage. Could also say the fight value is a pretty severe weakness as well. As with the all normal troops, as you're going to see with more and more of these profiles, I'm going to rate them a 1. They're not resistant at all, so they will be the plaything of an enemy caster if they need them to be. Special rules, I've given them a 6. The Savage Hunters rule is nice. And personal use wise, they're pretty fun to use. They do die though. That can go badly for you quickly if you don't manage the fight carefully. And final rating leaves them with a 3.6. Now moving on to the mounted version of the Hunter Orc, these are 15 points. They move 10 on the Fellwargs. Same stats as the Hunter Orc before, with the fight value, strength, defense, attack, wounds, courage, and all this. They come with armor, hand weapon, and Fellwarg, and you can give them bone a two-handed weapon. Similar thing for me with what I said on the foot variant. You don't really want to be taking the two-handed weapon, or if you did, you only want to take it on a small percentage of your mounted models, because you need to be making sure you win the fight. Especially if you've got a knockdown, you probably don't need the +1 to wound to actually be doing the damage. You've got enough dice that you should hopefully get the damage through. And discussing the orc bow on these and also on the on foot variant, you want to take some. A 4+ shoot value is nice, but because they're on a D4, there's a good chance your opponent's still going to be able to outshoot you. So do you really want that many bows? You maybe just want to take some to threaten enemy horses. That's about it. In terms of hero killing, monster killing, these sort of things, I've put them very similar to the previous profile, because if they charge, they get the extra attacks. They've got a bit more chance of doing damage and winning the fight. When it comes to troop killing, these are better because you will get the knockdown. Similar to the Hunter Orc Captain, these guys have only got one attack. If you charge, they'll get one for charging as Cav, and they'll get one for Savage Hunters, so there'll be a 3 dice charging Cav, which is really nice. So they should kill a lot of enemy troops, providing they can win the fight. In terms of price, I've given them a 6. I actually think this price is pretty decent, 15 points. For the model, for a potential cavalry model with 3 attacks on the charge. Survivability is a 2. It's better than the 1 because if you do lose the rider, you do get to do a courage test, and the wag might stay on courage 2. You've got a 41% chance of that courage test passing with 8+ courage. So that's a nice little thing to have. Keeps extra models on the board for you. Magic, they're extremely weak to it, of course, just like a normal troop. The special rule I've given them a 7 because they're mounted cav. It matters more to them getting the charge, and 3 attacks on the charge is really nice. And then last of all, personal use, given them a 6. It's really fun to suddenly have 3 dice on a charging troop. It's unheard of, is that? So it's a real nice little boon, is that. And final ratings, giving them a 3.7. Now moving on to your cheap mobility, we have the Fellwarg for 8 points. Moves 10, fight 3, strength 4, d4 with 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 8+, intelligence 7+. They're armed with their claws and their teeth, and their only special rule is fell sight, meaning they can charge models that they can't see. And yeah, they have only hero killing I've put as a 1, and monsters for 1 as well, because they've only got the 1 attack, low fight value. They're probably going to lose and die. They're just there as a sacrifice, really, to hold them up. For troop killing, I've given them a 3. If they do win the fight, strength 4, 1 attack, they've got a decent chance of doing a bit of damage, but they're unlikely to win the fight with just a single dice, no banner, low fight value. They are very often just a sacrifice to hold up an area with their larger base size. Hence why I've also given them a survivability of 1, because they die to shooting, they die in combat, they are very, very killable. Price-wise, I've given them a 5. They are pretty cheap. Fell sight is real nice to have on them, but because they are so easily killed, they're also it's a lot of points to go into them. Magic, I've given them a 1. Standard troop, again, they can't resist anything. And the special rule I've given them a 6 because fell sight is a really nice rule to have. You just keep them behind a building. Your opponent can't charge you, but you can charge them. It can be especially good on objectives. If you're contesting one and you think they've got a good chance of winning and killing your wag, you can just keep moving them out of sight and your opponent can't charge them. And as long as you're not broken and you're not having to take courage tests with them, they can be pretty good at holding an objective like that for you. And personal use, give them a 5. They're fun to use, they give you options, but sadly they do die a lot. And that leaves them with a final rating of only 2.7. Now let's discuss the strengths and weaknesses of this list. So you have a couple of formidable heroes, two huge hitters to choose from. You can build lists that include a lot of might, which gives you options and flexibility, which is really nice to have, especially considering you would like to be charging as much as you can. So having a lot of might means you can call heroic moves to make sure you are moving first. A big strength of this list is they have a lot of attacks on the charge, which is why charging is so important. You've got killing power. Strength 4 is your minimum across the entire army. You do have a lot of mobility. You've got fast mounted heroes. You've got cavalry. And you've even got the Felwargs, which move like cavalry, but yes, they give you the ability to dig stuff up, pick stuff up, without having to dismount, which Yasneg and Fimble can do for you as well, but it's nice to have it on a cheaper troop as well. A big strength of this list is some of the special rules. So Azog's hero killing, his extended standfast that affects heroes, Bolg's bringer of death, and now also Yasneg's price of failure rule, and Azog's shooting. Another big thing is the Pale Orc demands rule, meaning that whenever you're trying to charge, your Orc models get a +1 on their courage. So it just makes it a little more reliable. The army can no longer take a Warhorn, which it really suffers not having. But at least being able to be a bit better at charging terror models is useful. Weaknesses for this list, there's quite a few. So only fight value 3 across all your normal warriors. Even some of your heroes only being fight 4 is a bit of an issue, and not having strike. You don't have that many troops to choose from, so you've got all low defense troops, nothing else. And your courage as well. Even your heroes being 5+ courage, or lower if you go for some of the smaller heroes, they're not guaranteed to stay. And if they get tagged and you lose a move off, then your troops are all going to flee with courage of 8+. In terms of magic, you've got some will on some of your bigger heroes to resist, but you are quite weak to magic. And lastly, a new weakness to this edition is you can't take a banner with Azog Hunters anymore, which doesn't help the heroes. Now, in terms of competitive play, so a few recommendations and tactics. So, in terms of deployment, most players, when they see Azog and Bolg, they do fear what they can do to their favourite hero that they like, that have taken the list. My recommendation would always be to deploy their warbands last. Keep your opponent guessing as to where they're going to position them. Consider how you want to use them. So if you're running Bolg, you want to think about how can I get him into a good place to get him into troops and get his kill count up as quick as possible and as optimally as possible with as little risk. And then the opposite for Azog is you want to be thinking, right, how can I position him best to get him hunting my enemy's heroes? Azog's Hunters now have no banner. They also have no space supports. So the recommendation for deployment would be to spread your line as thin as it can, with the intention of trying to envelop your enemy using a thin line. Even if they have similar numbers to you, there's a good chance they'll be bubbling up more than you for banner effect, space supports. You just do a long, thin line and try and wrap around them, try and trap them, try and get into the back line. That is how Azog's Hunters win. In terms of gameplay, try and do what you can to protect your army from shooting on the way in, especially your heroes and the mounted ones in particular. Use some of your models as meat shields if you need to. Use terrain as best you can. You are going to take some damage on the way in. When you do get in, hit hard, hit fast, be aggressive. You've got a lot of resources, especially with your might. Use them to try and get an advantage early. Try and hold it. If you can get, like Bolg, for instance, to his mighty hero, or you can keep Azog and Yasneg near each other. Try and prepare your cavalry charge for the optimal turn of damage if you can. So if your opponent doesn't have cav that can countercharge or something of similar move, stand just outside of their movement range with all your cav, and then get them the next turn with one big charge with so many dice going at them. Once sustained combat does happen, keep in mind that if you win the fight, you've got a good chance of killing, but if you lose the fight, you're also going to be killed. There's no slow stalemate with this sort of army. You do need to just accept your losses. They are going to happen. Stay focused on the objective in the game. You are going to lose troops. Don't be downbeat. Don't be hard on yourself. You are going to lose troops. It's just going to happen. Do your best to envelop the enemy. Isolate them in one-on-one fights if you can, especially when you've got your 2 attacks on the charge. And your high strength should come out on top. You will lose some fights and lose some guys because you're low defense. But if you win, you've got a very good chance of wounding them back. Another idea as well would be keep one of your smaller, lesser heroes near your big hitter as a bit of a might caddy. This means they can call the heroic moves for you, so your big guys can save it for the important moments. If you can, because this army struggles so much against terror, use your big hitters to try and remove terror units where you can. They're going to cause you a lot of trouble otherwise, so if you can try and hit them hard and fast and get rid of them quick, that would be advisable. Now, because this army can take casualties very, very quickly, and especially once you break, you can quarter very quickly, or you can just lose loads of models very quickly to running away. Play the objective game right from the word go, because the game can end very quickly all of a sudden. Remember as well, your heroes can deal a lot of damage, especially if they're linking up with each other. You can flash kill enemy heroes very, very well. Get their big threats and big pieces off the board, and it gives you a huge advantage then going into the late game. Use your resources to force through some of these things to happen. And the improved shooting is good. 4+ is decent, but bear in mind they're still only 18-inch bows. They're only strength 2 bows. You've only got limited killing power, and if you get shot back, you're probably going to lose the shooting war. They'll be wounding you very, very easily. Use a few bowmen to hold objectives and things, threaten enemy horses, but that's about all they're good for. You don't want to go all shooting with this list. That's not the way to win with it. Now, in terms of how you can build this army, there's a few ways you could do it. You could go quite heavy on the heroes: Azog, Bolg, Yazneg, Nazug, Hunter Orc captains, even Fimble if you want as a push. You could go heavy on those. It would give you a lot of might. You'd be very mobile. You can really deal a lot of damage to enemy heroes and monsters, but you would be a low troop count doing that. Your other alternative would be to run a horde. You'd only take one of Azog or Bolg, a high number of troops, fill out the warbands. Especially when you're charging, you'd have an overwhelming number of dice on your opponent. And as I discussed in the previous slide, have a thin line and try and attempt to envelop your opponent if you can. You could build a shooting version of this if you went mostly for the lesser heroes. You did Bolg and Nazug and maybe like a Hunter Orc Captain or something. You could spam out a lot of bows, but personally I don't think it's the optimal way of building it. You would lose most shooting wars. You've then spent all those points on the bows, and it might not be worth it for you. And then the last list would be quite a fast cav-heavy list. If you run Azog and Yazneg with Hunter Orc Warg Riders, keep them together, Azog and Yazneg. Have a couple of honesty bows just to hold objectives and threaten horses. You've got great mobility for them pushing objectives on your opponent's side of the board really aggressively. And just take a contingent of some infantry to try and boost your numbers, just so you're not breaking too quickly. So in terms of army building, there's a few big questions. So the first one, quite obvious, first question is, do you take Azog, do you take Bolg, or do you take both? Now, Bolg, first of all, is the only D7 guy in the army. If you were taking him as your leader, he's a bit more survivable than Azog is, potentially. And also getting the possibility of Mighty Hero is really nice. However, you don't have any sort of banner in this list. So Bolg, even if he charges in, you've got 4 dice and that is it. And then you're relying on his might to back you up. it can go pretty wrong pretty quickly for Bolg in this list. Whereas at least Azog, it's harder for him to fluff it when he's on his white wagon. He's got 5 might behind him. You could try and run both together, but it is a huge point sink. Your numbers will be extremely low, or if you do manage to spam out a lot of numbers, you're not really going to have much might to back up Azog and Bolg. And yes, they've got 8 between them, but you don't really want to be wasting their might on heroic moves. So it would be better to, I'd say, always take just one or the other. Now, in my opinion, for Azog's Hunters, I would always take Azog. Now, he is only D5, but he does have an extra fate point at least. He's also got the extra will for resisting stuff. Having that 12-inch standfast that affects other heroes will help keep your army around. Nothing else in this list can do that for you. Having Azog also makes Yazneg a lot more viable, and I would say Yazneg is by far the most viable of the heroes to take. So that does move on to the next question, which would be Fimble, Yazneg or Nazog. I would say every list you start with Azog, and your second auto take should be Yazneg, and you run them both next to each other. They bounce off each other. It makes Yazneg extremely reliable. He can also help Azog. Between them, they're a really good pairing. Nazog is excellent. I'd definitely take him as the third choice. When I'm getting up in points where I can take a third warband. Fimble, sadly, has been very badly nerfed, and I don't think you'll be seeing him very often. I would actually take, moving on to this next question, I would actually take Hunter Orc Captains over Fimble. Just because of them having 4 dice on the charge over your only 3 for Fimble. And also they have the Heroic March for you as well, so you don't have to waste Azog's Might on that. And they can get you up the board quickly towards your enemy, so you're not taking as much bowfire. In terms of mounting heroes now, would we mount heroes? It is more expensive to do so now, but this army needs to be a fast-moving, hard-hitting force. So I would say yes, you need to mount all your heroes, except Nazog, because you can't. But Nazog is a bit of a unique piece in this army. In terms of Felwargs, they're very useful to the list to get your numbers up. You can also use them as meat shields for your fast-moving element, for them to take some of the bowfire and provide in the ways. They are going to die for you. You don't want loads of them because they're very, very squishy and they don't do much for you, really. I'd say you want somewhere between 6 and 10 in most lists, but no more than that. In terms of the mounted Hunter Orcs, now they've been massively buffed. They are expensive, but I think they're worth those points. They've got a lot of attacks on the charge. They can do a lot of damage. I would say they're extremely useful now. I would definitely take some. I wouldn't take a whole army of them. I wouldn't go all in on the cav. I would do a bit of a mix. You do want your numbers up in this because you are going to take a lot of casualties very quickly. In terms of bows, you can take up to 50%, and you're well within your rights to do that. But it does feel to me like it's a lot of wasted points. Whereas you could just take somewhere between 6 and 8, just to give you some shooting threat. You've got Nazog, who's your main shooting threat, and they can just sit on. You can have like 3 or 4 of them just sat on an objective, and if your opponent comes too close trying to push that objective, you can charge them and get loads of dice. And if they do come towards you, you can be shooting them on the way in as well. In terms of war gear for the Hunter Orcs, I think I've already discussed I wouldn't really take the 2-handed weapons. You could, if you were going for a decent numbers army, if you've got over 38, 40 models, maybe take a couple of them with 2-handed weapons and just have them running at the back of your line, and have them just go into heroes with Azog or something, or Yazneg, Bolg, and they can just assist with some of the damage, just to kind of make sure it goes through. Now, first example army for you, I've built at 600 points. I would have Azog on his White Warg for 225 points, 7 Hunter Orc Warg Riders as well, so quite a big cavalry force there. We'd have 3 Hunter Orcs with bows. They deploy within 6 of Azog as they have to, and they just run to like hold objectives, moving half movement, shooting while they're going and just slowly making their way to where they need to be. Couple of extra Hunter Orcs as well, just to get the numbers up. And then in Warband 2, I've got Yazneg on his Felwarg with a lance. He would be running right next to Azog the whole game, with 9 Hunter Orcs to get your numbers up, and then an additional 3 more Hunter Orcs with bows to go and hold an objective as a little triangle of doom shooting over each other's shoulders. That would give you 32 models, dead on 600 points, and you've got 8 might in the list there. It's very good might for this points level. 32 models seems quite low, considering how squishy your army is, but because there is 7 Hunter Orc Warg Riders, if they shoot the rider, you've got a 41% chance that the Warg will stay. So out of these 7 Warg Riders, if all 7 of them got shot off the Warg, 3 of those Wargs should stay. So you've got a good chance of essentially gaining a couple of models as well during the battle. So Azog's a huge hitter, a big point sink, but he's a huge hitter, very reliable. At 600 points, there's not going to be a huge amount your opponent can take that can deal with him. You're going to have to be very aware of Legolas, sadly, because he's now absolutely nuts. But yeah, running Yazneg and Azog next to each other, that's a really nasty hitting force. It's 305 points of damage dealing. Very concentrated, that can quickly turn a battle against your opponent. Second army example I've got is at 700 points. Now this one is still Azog on his White Warg. I've increased from 7 to 8 Hunter Orcs on Felwargs, and this time I've filled out his warband with 6 Felwargs. Now they will be used for in the ways. They'll also be used to tag up and tie up things that I don't want to engage with, or if I need to stop them from getting through a certain area, they can just clog a gap, while Azog and his mounted guys can go to work where I want them concentrated. I've taken Yazneg on his Felwarg with a lance again. Exactly the same, I've run him right next to Azog the whole game. And then there are 12 Hunter Orcs filled out in his warband to get the numbers up. And then last but not least, we've gone for Nazog for warband 3. So he has 4 Hunter Orcs with bows as well. I'd probably separate them into 2 pairs, and they would run off and kind of sit on an objective, while Nazog maybe holds another objective and shoots away at the enemy heroes and horses and stuff. And then, last of all, just 5 Hunter Orcs in there again, just to get the numbers up. It gives you 38 models. 10 might at 700 points is pretty good as well. And as I say, because you've got 8 Hunter Orcs on Felwargs, even if they get dismounted, about half those Wargs should stay as well, so it does help your numbers a little bit. And then moving on to 800 points, we've got this example army 3. So this would be, again, Azog on White Warg. I've gone with the same composition in his warband of 8 Hunter Orcs on Felwargs and 6 Felwargs. Yazneg with a lance and Felwarg again with 12 Hunter Orcs to get your numbers up. This time I've got Nazog with 7 Hunter Orcs with bows. So again, I'd probably run them in two groups. So I'd have Nazog with 3 Hunter Orcs and then 4 Hunter Orcs in the other one. And they would go and hold objectives and shoot away at the opponent. And then I've got another Hunter Orc captain on Warg with 6 Hunter Orcs just to get the numbers up. I've got him on the Felwarg as well, just so he's got those 4 attacks when he's charging. That gives you 12 might at 800 points, which is nice. 43 models is a good number. And again, it's probably a little higher because you've got some Wargs that should stay around for you as well. Now, final rating for Azog's Hunters. I've given them a 9 for how can they deal with big heroes. You've got Azog and Bolg, fantastic at dealing with heroes. You've even got Yazneg at a push that can deal with a big hero, potentially, if he strikes well. If you come up against a high defense army, if it's D6 or lower, you're fine. You're minimum strength 4 everywhere. You're in a pretty good position to deal with that. You've got a lot of knockdown potential, having so much cav and also mounted heroes. I've only given it a 7 though, not higher, because if you did come up against a D7 army, most of your normal troops are going to struggle a little bit. Now, in terms of horde armies, if you faced a horde army, I've given them an 8 because you've got extra attacks potentially when you're charging, which will be about half the time. You've got high strength infantry. If you're winning the fight, you should be killing. You are sadly going to also take damage if you're losing that fight. But they are pretty well equipped to deal with hordes. You've also got fantastic infantry killers like Yazneg, like Azog, like Bolg. Also, Nazog can do some damage to them on the way in as well. If you face a whole cavalry army, something like Rohan, for instance, I've given them a 6 here because you've got your wargs that can intercept them. You've got heroes that can probably deal with them. And your Hunter Orc Cav as well will cancel their charges out. But you will be reducing your own effectiveness because your own Cav charging into their Cav, you're not getting the extra dice either. And that's a bit of a problem. So you're not badly equipped to deal with cavalry, but it's also not ideal for you. In terms of monsters, you've really only got Azog and Bolg that can reliably win and deal damage to hit monsters. If you face an all-monster army, eagles, ents, anything like that, you have a bit of a problem. You are very much relying on those two getting the damage for you. In terms of magic, I've put this as biggest weakness. I've only rated it a 2. You've got very limited will, no resistance at all, no way to get it back, no way to hold out sustainably. My best advice would be use the will sparingly and use your might if needed to stop and resist some spells. Your will is slightly more needed in your army. It's more important than actually your might. And last of all, dealing with terror armies, I've only given it a 4 because low courage, there's no warhorn now. You can use your big heroes to try and kill some of the terror models, but it depends how badly it's affected. If it's an all terror army, you have got a real problem. You do get +1 when charging to your courage, but it's still not great, especially if there's a Harbinger nearby. You guys are courage 8+. Even with a +1 with a Harbinger nearby, you still only got a 41% chance of charging. If you're not charging and you're broken and your opponent's got a Harbinger, you've only got a 28% chance of passing that courage for people to stay on the board. So only 1 in 4 guys will stick around. So you can be in real trouble there. In terms of final rating, though, for this army, I've given it a 7.5. It's really fun to use. It's fast. You've got great manoeuvrability, flexibility, good, decent cav now at a decent price if you use it well. Azog and Bolg are really fun to use. They can be relied on to do a lot of damage for you. I think it can be relatively competitive at certain points levels. I think it's better at 600 points. If you're going higher to 700 and 800, there's more likelihood you're going to face magic or terror, and that can be quite rough for this army. You need to manage this army carefully. It could win really well and overwhelm and hit hard on your opponent and be quite hard to deal with. But if you're up against a good player, they also will know its weaknesses quite clearly as well. So yes, that is the end of the video. Hope you have enjoyed it. This should hopefully be the first of many like this. If you have liked what I've put together here, please like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Goodbye.